Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the SCRA, which is the Service Members Civil Relief Act. This is specifically in the context of if you are a tenant that is in the military, or if you're a landlord who is renting to a tenant that is in the military or is going to be. So who does the SCRA protect? Full-time active duty, reservists, National Guard, as well as injured service members. So it protects full-time active duty members of each of the 5 branches. So the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Space Force, I think I miscounted. Again, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Space Force. 6 branches, excuse me, I forgot the Space Force. As well as reservists, or on federal active duty, and members of National Guard, as long as they're on federal orders for longer than 30 days. And then service members absent from duty for a lawful cause or because of injury or illness. Next, eligibility for SCRA lease protections. So in order for a service member to be protected under the SCRA, the premises must be or must intended to be occupied by a service member and or the service member's dependents. All right, so eligibility for SCRA lease protections. So in order for a service member to be protected under the SCRA, the premises must be or must intended to be occupied by a service member and or the service member's dependents. Also, the lease must be either executed by a person who is already in or is going to be in military service and subsequently receives PCS orders or deployment orders for 90 days or longer. So the maximum monthly rent for protection under the SCRA is, as of 2022, $4,214.28. Now, your protection only applies if your rent is below this threshold. And this is based on the DoD via the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, which periodically makes adjustments for inflation. So if your monthly rent is $4,215 a month, then you are not subject to normal protections under the SCRA. There still might be other protections, but your rent has to be below that threshold to fully avail yourself of the protections from termination and other harassment and undue influence by the landlord, as I'll talk about in a minute. So, in order to avail yourself of SCRA protections and terminate the lease early, you must, as a service member, first submit written notice to the landlord or the landlord's agent and include military orders, or if for OPSEC reasons or other reasons that you're not comfortable submitting your orders for, then you can get a letter signed by your CO, by your commanding officer. So if you're a landlord, you are entitled to receive a notice, and you also are entitled to the service member's orders or a letter signed by the CO, which should have contact information if you want to verify the authenticity. So how early can a lease be terminated? Well, once the service member delivers notice of early termination to the landlord, along with a copy of the military orders or the CO's letter, then for leases, the tenancy will terminate the last day of the month following the month in which the notice is delivered. And then for month to month, the landlord is obligated to terminate the lease 30 days past the next rental due date. So in other words, as you see on the slide here, let's say you, as a landlord, you receive the notice on or about August 1st. Well, the next month that the rent is due, assuming it's due on the 1st of the month, would be September 1st. So that's the 30 days that you count following that September 1st deadline, which means the earliest that you are required to let that service member terminate is 1 October. So protections from eviction. A landlord seeking to evict a service member and or the service member's dependents must first obtain a court order to do so. And in order to evict a tenant in California, the landlord must go through a process known as an unlawful detainer. Now, this means that the landlord cannot evict without a judicial order. But even in states that don't require a judge's order, such as states that offer non-judicial evictions, a landlord still must obtain a court order. And if the tenant requests so, the default judgment that may ensue because the military tenant is not able to appear, or the military members overseas, his dependents living there are not able to appear, then the military member or the dependents can apply for a stay of the default judgment because they didn't appear. Also, a guardian ad litem may be appointed in the interest of justice by the judge if it's impossible for the military member to appear or the military member's dependents. Now, other SCRA protections, so in addition to the protections in connections with evictions, foreclosures, and installment contracts, the SCRA also provides the following protections. A 6% interest rate cap on most installment contracts. Now that applies to installment contracts that were incurred before the eligible date for SCRA protection, before that service member went on active duty. Once they're on active duty, or once they're a reservist that is on active recall, you can't get another installment contract and then ask for it to be lowered down to 6% in most cases. Now next, ability to stay civil court proceedings. Obviously, if you're overseas, you're not able to appear, you're going to get a default judgment against you normally if you're a civilian. If you're under the SCRA, you can stay, in other words, postpone civil court proceedings so you don't get a default judgment against you. And that also pertains to number 3. So most civil court proceedings, going back to number 2, also administrative actions from administrative agencies, those give you protections under the SCRA. They can't normally prosecute those against you like they could a normal civilian. And then, of course, residential lease deposits and termination. So normally, for example, in California, there's a strict limit on how much you can charge a tenant with a security deposit. Usually it's 2 months for an unfurnished unit, 3 months for a furnished unit. It's lowered for a service member. So I hope that you found this helpful. I'll try to give you just a quick overview. This is not legal advice specific to your case because every case is different. You need to talk to an attorney. I'm happy to help you. I'm not necessarily doing this pro bono. If you want my help, I do need to charge, but that's why you should probably seek legal advice from your staff judge advocate first. You also should try to do as much research as you can on the internet with the caveat in mind that you will always find an answer on Google, but you will not always find the correct answer. For that, you should avail yourself of competent legal counsel, which this, for you, is not a replacement for. Don't rely on the internet for legal advice, but it is a good place to get started. Here are the references that I've used for this presentation. If you found this helpful, please let me know. I would like to hear from you in the form of a comment. Let me know what you like about this. Let me know what you'd like me to cover next, and I will take that into account. I know your time is valuable. I appreciate you spending it with me. Thank you.